So now we want to put the profile listings on the page because right now these are just hard-coded HTML. So first thing I want to do is create the API route to get the user's listings. Now there's really two ways we could do this. We could make it so that we hit just like /API/ property / user and then get the user from the session, right? Which would make it so only that user could get the listings, or we can make it so that we can use the user ID in the API URL, but then anyone could get anyone's listings, which in this case, that's what I'm going to do because I don't have a problem with that. In fact, that might be something you want to do later, is make it so that someone can click on anyone's name or image or whatever and get that user's listings. Okay, so it's up to you on how you want to do it. I'm going to put the user ID right in the URL, which means anyone could get anyone's listings. Not edit them or delete them or anything like that, just see the other person's listings. If you don't want that, then just get the user from the session on the server, and that makes it so only that user can get their listings. So let's start off here by creating a new API route. So in API properties, let's create a folder called user, and then we're going to pass in the user ID. So in user, we'll create another folder called brackets ID. So that's going to be the user. Actually, you know what? Let's call it, just because this is a little confusing, let's go ahead and call this user ID instead. So user ID like that. And then inside that folder is where we want to create our actual route.js file. So first thing we'll do, actually, you know what, we'll just copy from this properties route.js. Let's grab the get and the imports because we do need some of these. So now we'll go back into the user ID route. And let's see, we're not going to need Cloudinary or the session because again the ID will be in the URL. It's going to look like this: get request to properties / and then user, right? Because we have a user folder / and then the user ID. Okay, and then in order to get the ID, we need to add on here an object with params, because that will allow us to get the dynamic user ID from the URL. Then we're going to connect to the database, so we can keep that. The user ID, let's say const user ID, and we're going to set that to params.user ID. And the reason it's user ID is because that's what I called the folder. If I called the folder ID, then it would be params.id. Now let's make sure that there's a user, so we'll say if not user ID, then let's return a new response, and for this we'll just say user ID is required. And then for the status, in this case, we'll just do 400. All right, and then underneath that, if we want to get the property, so this right here where it says await property find, we just want to pass in here owner, because we want to make sure we get only the owner's listings. So set that to user ID. And then for the response, we can just keep that as is. It's going to send back the properties for that specific user. And yeah, we should be good as far as that goes. So we'll save that. Now, again, these will be public, so we could actually test this out now by getting a user ID. So if I go here and get this, if I can grab it, so get this user ID, and let's go to API / properties / user / and then that user ID. And there you go. So we have all the listings for that specific user. Next thing we're going to do is go back into our profile page, so we can close up that route and go into profile page.jsx. And from here, we're going to want to import, let's see, we're going to import useState and useEffect. Okay, and then I'm also going to bring in the spinner just to load while we're fetching, so import spinner. And then we want to add a couple state values here, so let's say const and properties set properties useState, and we're going to set that just to an empty array by default. And then let's do a loading, which will be true by default. So set loading and loading. Now we want to fetch the data, so we're going to create a useEffect. Pass in our function with the dependencies. Dependency is going to be the session. Okay, and then in the useEffect, we're going to, first of all, since it's going to be asynchronous, we need to create an async function. So let's say const fetch user properties and set that to async, and it's going to get passed in user ID. And let's see, we're going to, in here, let's first check to make sure that there is a user ID. So we'll say if not user ID, then return. And if there is, then let's do a try catch. Okay, then we want to create our request. So let's say const res, set that to await, and then make our fetch request. And that's going to be, let's put backticks in here because it's going to be have a dynamic ID. So /API/properties/user/ and then the user ID. ID is going to get passed in. It's going to get passed in through the session when we call this function. So now underneath that res, let's check the response. Let's say if the res.status, so if that is equal to 200, meaning it's okay, then we want to, let's say, const data, get that from await res.json, and then we want to set our property state to that data because it's going to return the properties. And we also want to set loading, let's set loading to false. Actually, you know what we'll do? Instead of setting loading here, we'll do it in the finally. So down here, we'll say try catch finally, because we want that loading to get set no matter what. Whoops. Set loading to false. All right, now up here, so setting the properties, if there's an error, then we'll just do a console log of that error. And yeah, now we want to call this fetch user properties, but we only want to call it if the session data is available. So let's go under the function, which ends here, still within the useEffect, and we'll say fetch user properties if or when session is available. So let's say if, and we're going to check session.user.id. Yeah, we'll check for that. And if that's there, then we'll call our fetch user properties, and we're going to pass in session.user.id. Okay, so that's being passed in right here. We're checking for it, then we're making our request to the API route that we just created. If it's good, we're setting the data that comes back to the properties, and we're setting loading to false no matter what. All right, so let's just save and see if we get any kind of, whoops, what did I do that for? If we get any kind of errors. Okay, let's go to the network tab and see if it's actually fetching. So let's see, right here, there we go. So we're getting, looks like we're getting the array of listings. So now, since properties is being filled, let's come down to the HTML where it says your listings. And let's see, I'm going to go under the H2 and open some curly braces. And let's check if not loading and properties.length, if that is equal to 0, then there's no you don't have any properties. So we'll do double ampersand, and then in here we'll just do a paragraph and say you have no property listings. Okay, so we'll do that, and then let's go right under that and do another conditional where we'll say if it's loading, then show the spinner. So spinner, which takes in loading. Okay, so if it's loading, we're going to show the spinner, else then we'll open up another set of parentheses, and then in here is where we want to use our map and loop through the properties. So let's say properties dot map, and then in here we'll have our function. So let's say we'll call this property, and in here what we want to show is this div right here that wraps. Let's see, where does this end? So this is the first listing, the hard-coded listing. I'm going to grab that. So it ends right here, and it starts here. It's that MB10. So I'm just going to, well, we can just cut it because we're not going to need it. And we can also get rid of the second one, which ends here. Okay, those are just the hard-coded, these here. And then let's paste that in. Let's save it. And you can see now I have 3 because this user has 3 listings. Now it's all hard-coded data, so we'll change that. Let's go directly in the map in this div, and we need to add a key because it's a list. So let's set that to the property dot underscore ID, right? And then the link, first of all, we want this to be link. And then href is going to be, wait, what did I just do? Okay, that just confused me. All right, change this to link. And then let's put some backticks in here, and that's going to go to /properties, right? /properties / and then the property dot underscore ID. So that'll go to the actual page. And then the image tag here, let's change that to image. And let's add the source, which is going to be, let's use the first image in the array. So remember, we have property dot images, which is an array, and we'll get the first one. Okay, and then for the alt, I'm just going to get rid of that. And we want to add a width. Let's say width 500 and height, we'll do 100. And then priority, we'll set that to true. All right, so let's see if the images show, which they do. Let's make sure there's no weird warnings. Let's reload. All right, so that looks good. Now we want the data here to be the actual data, so that's really simple. We'll just change this to property name, property dot name. And then for the address, it's made up of a couple things. The street, well, actually right here we only have the street, but I want to change that to have everything. So let's say property.location.street, and then we'll do space, and then location dot, or sorry, property location, and then city, and then property dot location dot state. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, good. And then let's see, we have a link here. Let's change that to a link, and it's going to be the edit page. So obviously we haven't created that yet, but the link will be /properties/ and then the ID. So property._ID and then /edit. And then let's see, down here we have the delete button. So let's create an on-click handler and set that to a function that calls handle. We'll call this handle delete property, and pass in the property._ID, which right now I'm not going to do the delete functionality, but we do want to at least create the function. So up here above the return, we'll say const handle delete property, and just create it like that. All right, so now we should see the correct addresses. If I click edit, the page doesn't exist, but it goes to the right URL. All right. Awesome. So far, so good. In the next video, I want to take care of the delete, and then we'll move on to the edit.